Now, why? So you would assume that there are certain things that everybody or many people would be exposed to, and many that would be more variable. I'm going to make you an argument that our bodies do not have as many ways of handling environmental stressors as there are environmental stressors. In other words, we don't come up with a new liver enzyme for every new chemical the chemical industry comes out with, or whatever. We don't come up with a new antibody. So what you have, antibody might not be such a good one, you have a lot of environmental inputs: chemicals, allergens, metals, radiation, infection, drugs, toxins, stress, noise. That's just a cartoon. They all go through your body's core and ancient defense mechanisms and metabolism. So energy, you know, they affect the way you handle energy. They affect the way you handle other things. They can speed up or slow down chemical processes. They affect your immune defense. They affect your kidneys, your liver, your connective tissue, the cellular communication, how you detoxify. And you only have so many ways of doing those things. So many different agents converge on a much smaller number of pathways in our body. And one of the things that the body does, and I'm going to talk about this, is it gets inflamed. That's a defense mechanism. It's okay if it goes on for a short period of time, because it protects you. The problem is when it gets stuck in an inflamed place and you can't unstick it. And you've probably seen stories about inflammation epidemics and so forth. Oxidative stress is a little bit more complicated to explain, but it has to do with how we use and handle chemicals, and we produce a certain number of something called free radicals, and normally we keep it within a certain range, and if it gets too high, because we can't contain it, those things can start causing destruction. But when we're exposed to things, each of us are exposed in our own way, with our own genes, our own time in development. Each of the things we're exposed to has specific properties, and then whether we're healthy, we're sick, we're stressed, we're not stressed, we slept, we didn't sleep. So you get a bunch of specific diseases, and some people are beginning to think that there's a certain amount of specificity to what causes diseases, but it's just, sometimes it's just that the way the body breaks down under stress is what's the specific thing. And in this argument, what we're doing is we're overflowing the levees. It's like it's not any one thing, but the whole mess of it together is overwhelming the system. Now, this is not just overwhelming our kids and our own health. In 2005, the UN came out with a Millennial Assessment Report, and in their executive statement, they said that ecosystem damage is so severe that we can no longer be confident that the planet Earth can support life for more than 2 generations. This is huge news in Europe, and it got 3 paragraphs in the New York Times. And there's an author who has written, Philip Shaverkov, who's written Poison Prophets, and which I recommend. And he was a award-winning New York Times reporter, and he had to leave. And one of the reasons was he was talking. This was quite a while ago that he left, but he was talking about global warming too much, and they didn't want to hear about it. And I wrote to the New York Times, and I'm like, what planet are you living on? 3 paragraphs for the most important story of our time, of any time. And please tell your readership about the other planet that you have lined up in your back pocket to go to. And so that's the global picture. So this is not just autism. This is a breakdown in planetary cycles and metabolic cycles that are all interrelated. So I think you really need to know that you're not just having a personal problem here. It is a personal problem, but our personal problems are not just us. So more than brain, we're having body problems. Is this something new? Is this a new variant of autism, but really there's this classic autism which didn't have these body problems? Is it that back in 1943 when Leo Kanner wrote the first paper, these kids already didn't have this stuff, and it's just something new? Well, if you go back, and in Brian Jepson, who wrote a book, Changing the Course of Autism, which is another one worth reading, if you reread the original paper by Leo Kanner, which named autism as a syndrome, you find that in almost every single case there were problems: eating, tonsils, diarrhea, vomiting, malnutrition, recurrent infections, colds, bronchitis. infection, vitiligo, ear infections. Now, if you were a psychiatrist in 1943, you wouldn't say, aha, this is all part of the definition, because this is stuff that people get. And they aren't the same from kid to kid. So it's not surprising that they left this out of the definition. But I think what you note now is not simply that they had these things, but they also had them chronically and a lot. There was a recent paper saying that GI wasn't a part of autism any more than anything else, but the methodology of that paper apparently included that in order to be counted as having a GI problem, all you had to do was have diarrhea once. So it made no distinction between having diarrhea once, which almost everybody's had, and having it every damn day, which is a really different thing. So I think what's interesting here is that there was something going on and that it was pretty chronic. And that now that we're learning more and more about brain and body relationships, this is something which comes more to the foreground instead of being off in the background as not particularly relevant. This is a boy with really bad diarrhea. It's gross. And that stuff on the floor is his poop, and the stuff in his hands is his poop, and the stuff coming out above his pants is his poop. And on the right is a picture of a species diagram of Clostridial bacteria. And Sidney Feingold found that in children with autism there are 9 variants of Clostridial bacteria which you don't find in typicals, and 3 in typicals that you don't find in controls. And Clostridia, some of those variants are very well known to cause bad diarrhea. They also are killed by oxygen, they're anaerobic, so you can't just pop them in and get them tested. You have to freeze the poop immediately or they die. So any standard poop test is not going to show this stuff, even if it's there. So we are at the very early stages of learning how to really make sense of this. And the whole idea that the gut bacteria affect, there are differences, for example, in gut bacteria in diabetes, in obesity, in heart disease, in many conditions which you would never have dreamed would have anything to do with the gut, even Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So this is an area which is opening up like crazy. And it's certainly going on in autism.